His answers were so outstanding. I don't know how we're going to beat that here, but we're going to try. Please state your name and your wife's name and where you're from, sir.
I'm Derek Chauvin, and my outstanding wife is Kelly Chauvin, Mrs. Oakdale, Minnesota.
Every year in America, officers of the law kill over 1,000 U.S. citizens. 99% of these killings don't result in the officer being charged with a crime. But the numbers only tell one side of the story, so we bring you the other. Welcome to American Wounds. This is episode 1 of the Killer Cop series. I'm your host, Nate Grapes. In today's video, we take you behind the badge to tell the harrowing story of a killer cop named Derek Chauvin. As the nation erupted over the tragic death of George Floyd, R.I.P., it would take days of protest before charges were filed against Derek Chauvin. Most of the details surrounding both the case and the man responsible remain cloaked in mystery. This is what we know. At 44 years of age, Derek Chauvin is a 19-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department, dedicating nearly half his life to the force. Derek began his career in blue at the Minneapolis, Minnesota Police Academy in October of 2001. Here, he would graduate and take an oath to serve mankind, safeguard lives and property, protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, the peaceful against violence or disorder, while respecting the constitutional rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice, as stated in the Minneapolis Police Department Code of Conduct. Derek was hired full-time by the Minneapolis Police Department in 2003. Minneapolis City Council records show that over his 19-year career, Derek worked in the 1st, 3rd, and 4th precincts, as well as serving on the waterworks security detail for the Minneapolis Police Department. On top of his work for the MPD, Derek also moonlighted as a bouncer at a Latin nightclub called El Nuevo Rodeo on Lake Street in Minneapolis' downtown. According to the nightclub's owner, Derek had held shifts on and off since the nightclub opened over 17 years prior. In 2010, after 9 years in the force, Derek married his wife, Kelly Chauvin. Since then, the couple have lived together in Oakdale, Minnesota, a suburb of St. Paul on the east side of the Twin Cities metropolitan area. Derek isn't the only Minneapolis police officer to live outside the city itself. In 2014, the Minnesota Post reported that 94% of the Minneapolis police force was living outside of the city at the time. This meant that the MPD had one of the lowest residency rates of any major police force in the U.S. The article found a correlation between the MPD's low residency rate and their issues with diversity on the force, and whether this had an effect on how the citizens of Minneapolis were being perceived and policed in their own city. Throughout their marriage, both Derek and Kelly worked in and around the real estate sector. Both have their real estate license. However, Derek's is currently inactive. A spokeswoman for a Minnesota realty group said that Derek had worked as an independent contractor as recently as 2019. At this time, there is still little to be known of Derek's personal life. Whenever an officer is involved in a publicized incident, the internet is combed through to remove any photos and personal information of the officer. However, coincidentally, Derek's wife Kelly was the subject of a profile piece in the St. Paul Pioneer Press after winning the title of Mrs. Minnesota in 2018. Kelly was born in Laos and was the first Hmong woman to win the title. She told the Pioneer that Derek had introduced himself at the hospital she was working at when he brought in an injured suspect he'd arrested earlier that day. But Kelly went on to say about her husband, quote, "Under all that uniform, he's just a softie. He's such a gentleman. He still opens the door for me. Still puts my coat on for me." End quote. While we may not know much about Derek's personal life, what we do know about his past on the force would suggest he was anything but soft. After killing George Floyd on Memorial Day, Derek's 19-year career has been the subject of much investigation and debate. Several publicly recorded incidents of violence as well as habitual marks of misconduct begin to paint a portrait of controversy. But before making your judgment, let's take a look at each case on the record. Derek's history of violence began only a few years after entering the force. On April 24, 2005, Derek and his partner Terry Nutter were involved in a dangerous high-speed car chase when a suspect they were pursuing slammed his vehicle into another car. Two occupants of the civilian vehicle, Darwin Vavar, age 28, and Clavar Jacob, age 35, were killed instantly from the impact. The third occupant, Everett Vavar, age 35, would die a few days later in the hospital from injuries sustained in the accident. Both Derek and his partner Terry were cleared of any wrongdoing. Despite high-speed police pursuits being the subject of controversy and hot debate at the time. In fact, 15 years after Derek's high-speed chase ended in the tragic loss of 3 young lives, the Minneapolis Police Department decided in the summer of 2019 to implement new rules limiting when and how officers could pursue a suspect. Perhaps such a law could have saved 3 innocent lives had it been enacted sooner. It was only 1 year after the fatal crash that Derek would be involved in his first police shooting, a dramatic incident that resulted in the death of one Wayne Reyes. In 2006, Derek was among a group of 6 MPD officers who responded to reports that Wayne Reyes had stabbed both his girlfriend and another man inside an apartment. When the officers arrived, they assert that Wayne fled the scene in a pickup truck where he was ultimately stopped several blocks away. The pickup was surrounded, and this was when the officers claimed that Wayne abruptly stepped out of the truck and pointed a sawed-off shotgun in their direction. All 6 officers, Dante Dean, Brian Graham, Sean Kelly, Oscar Messias, Terry Nutter, and Derek Chauvin immediately discharged their weapons on the truck, killing Wayne where he stood. The gunshots destroyed the truck and severely damaged the facade of a nearby building. In 2008, 2 years after the incident, a grand jury would determine that the officers' use of force was justified in the killing of Wayne Reyes. Wayne was 42 years old at the time of his death. In the same year that Reyes was killed, Chauvin and 7 other officers were named in a federal lawsuit. The suit was filed by John Otto Randall, an inmate at the Minnesota Correctional Facility at Lino Lakes, but was ultimately dismissed without prejudice later that year. Despite Derek's record of incidents on the force, the MPD awarded him a Department Medal of Valor in 2008 for his response in an incident involving a man armed with a gun. He would be recognized by the department the following year as well. Less than 2 years after the Reyes incident, in the spring of 2008, Derek would be involved in his second on-duty shooting, this time the lone gunman. Just after 2 a.m. early in the morning on May 24th, Derek responded to a 911 call requesting assistance for an in-action domestic assault occurring in the Phillips neighborhood just south of Minneapolis' downtown. Derek and his partner forced their way into the apartment and confronted the suspect, 21-year-old Ira Latrell Tolles, whose partner and mother of his child had made the call. A Twin Cities Pioneer Press article reported off MPD statements at the time said that Ira, quote, ran from the officers as soon as they got inside, but they caught him and tried to subdue him. In the struggle, Tolles grabbed at one of the officers' guns, end quote. This is when Chauvin fired his weapon, hitting Ira in the torso and nearly ending his life. Recently, the Daily Beast interviewed Ira Tolles, who contradicted the MPD statements. Ira would admit to the Daily Beast that the mother of his child had indeed called the police that night, but said he'd been surprised when 2 officers had barged into the house unannounced. Ira said, quote, when I saw that Chauvin breached the front door, I ran in the bathroom. Then Chauvin starts kicking in that door, end quote. Ira would go on to say that Chauvin broke into the bathroom and started hitting him without warning, to which Ira returned with blows of his own because, quote, my natural reaction to someone hitting me is to stop them from hitting me. All I could do is assume it was the police because they didn't announce themselves or ever give me a command. I didn't know what to think when Chauvin started hitting me. I swear he was hitting me with the gun, end quote. Despite his severe injuries, Ira would be taken to the Hennepin County Medical Center, where he learned that Chauvin had shot him at such close range that the bullet went through his groin and came out of his left butt cheek before hitting the bathroom wall. Ultimately, Ira would survive, but he was left with a lifelong reminder in the form of a hole that remains so large he can stick a finger inside of it to this day. Ira claims that he has no memory of being shot and definitely has no memory of reaching for a gun. In the same Daily Beast article, he goes on to say, quote, "If Chauvin's first reaction was hitting me in the face, that means I can't see and I'm too disoriented to first locate his gun and then try to take it from him. And for what? To turn a misdemeanor disorderly situation into a felony situation that could have resulted in me dying." End quote. Ira would finish the Daily Beast article by saying, quote, "He tried to kill me in that bathroom. I knew he would do something again. I wish we had smartphones back then." End quote. Derek would be placed on a standard 3-day leave for his roles as gunman, but he was quickly brought back on the force without any charges or public punishment whatsoever. It wasn't until 2011 that Derek would be involved in his third shooting while in uniform. This incident occurred near the Little Earth of United Tribes public housing complex south of Minneapolis' downtown. Little Earth is an affordable housing community that gives preference to American Indians. A police report states that just before 11:15 p.m., Derek and longtime partner Terry Nutter, the same man that had been involved in at least 2 of Derek's violent encounters, responded to the report of a shooting alongside officers Steve Herron, Brandon Brugger, and Gwen Gunter. When they arrived on the scene, they found 23-year-old suspect Leroy Martinez running away from them on foot. In the official report, the officers assert that Leroy was running with a pistol in his hand. As officers chased him down, they claim to have repeatedly yelled for him to drop the gun. When he refused, one of the officers fired on Leroy, striking and wounding him. The official statement from then Police Chief Tim Dolan was that the officers, including Chauvin, quote, "acted appropriately and courageously." Despite the police chief's co-sign of the official report, a local resident of the Little Earth community, Delora Iceman, contradicted the officer's statements. The eyewitness claimed that she saw Leroy throw his gun to the ground and hold his hands in the air as he was told to do, when one of the officers shot him. Delora, who watched from her balcony, claimed the officers had no reason to shoot Leroy, who was treated for the bullet wound at the Hennepin County Medical Center, where he would eventually recover. A surveillance video of the shooting exists, according to official records, but the security camera may have been partially obstructed by a tree. A copy of the video was turned over to the police department and all of the officers were put on standard 3-day administrative leave with no further charges or punishment of any kind. In addition to these 4 major incidents, online city records indicate that more than 18 official complaints were filed against Derek Chauvin during his 19 years on the force. According to the watchdog group Communities United Against Police Brutality, during the nearly 2 decades that Derek was with the Minneapolis Police Department, he has been the subject of several internal complaints, including 2 letters of reprimand for unprofessional and dangerous behavior while on duty. In 3 separate reviews from the Civilian Review Authority, he was found to have used a, quote, demeaning tone and, quote, derogatory language. A subject of 7 reviews by the local Office of Police Conduct, and all concluded with, quote, closed, no discipline. No other details were made available to the public. That concludes part 1 of Killer Cops, the story of Derek Chauvin. Now that we've led you through Chauvin's personal life, as well as his 19 years on the force, in part 2 will arrive at Memorial Day 2020, when Derek Chauvin would commit his most heinous act yet. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe so that you're notified on our next upload to this story.